So hi everyone, sorry it will be in English. I don't speak a word of Polish, like a little, but not enough to do a presentation. So during this session, I will be talking about CloudBees CI. My name is Frederic Gibelin. As you can see on the screen, I'm a solution architect at CloudBees since more than a year now. And today's session is all about CloudBees CI, but you will adapt as it's also known as Jenkins Enterprise. So CloudBees CI it will be the enterprise version of Jenkins during this presentation. So whenever you hear CloudBees CI, relate to Enterprise Jenkins. So who is CloudBees for now? CloudBees is we like to say the company behind Jenkins. So over the years, we've been writing around 80% of Jenkins source code. We are a strong contributor to Jenkins community. We have customers all around the world, and we are almost 500 employee company spread in 19 countries and still growing. So first, let's talk about Jenkins. Most of you already know Jenkins. Obviously, for those who don't know, Jenkins is a super powerful CI tool. It supports many technologies. Pipeline as code since many years now. We added the Blue Ocean UI some years ago. Many important features that allows you to run your build, tests, scans, everything a CI tool needs to do, Jenkins does. A strong plugin ecosystem also, around 1,800 plugins between community plugins, proprietary plugins that we will be talking about during this session. So Jenkins is open source. Jenkins is super powerful. Jenkins is widely used in many companies. Still, we found some patterns around the globe in the companies. Even myself, as I was a CloudBees CI customer in my past life, I was in those patterns as well. So the first one, we call that the islands of Jenkins. So the islands of Jenkins, what does it mean? It means when you have a company with many teams spread around the world, or sometimes in a country itself, all the application teams like to have a Jenkins master. We'll be talking about Jenkins controller, as we don't use the word master, so I'll be talking about controllers today. So people like to have a Jenkins controller installed for them. They use it on their application team. But it's good in a development perspective because you have your controller, you do whatever you want with that. You have freedom, you have flexibility. But from a central point of view, from a company point of view, from an enterprise point of view, you are disconnected from the security system. You are disconnected from the SSO, the LDAP sometimes. And you lack sometimes lack of visibility, lack of monitoring. If the controller crashes, your team is impacted. And sometimes there's no backup for that. So there's good in freedom part, but there's bad practice in the compliance and security part. On the right side of the screen, you can see what we call the Jenkinstein. So it's the big master, the big Jenkins controller that people use. So in some companies, they like to have that because it's fine. You give that to a shared service center, you give that to a central management team. It's very nice on a management point of view because you manage only one instance and you onboard everybody and all the teams on it. So from a central team perspective, it's really nice. But from a user perspective, from development perspective, you lack freedom because whenever you want to install a plugin, upgrade a plugin, change a configuration, you have to put that for everybody at the same time. Whenever the instance crashes for any reason, everybody's impacted. And we don't like that. So we believe there's good and bad in both patterns. So what we try to do with CloudBees CI is take good from both worlds and gather them in the enterprise version of Jenkins. So this is where we move from Jenkins to Jenkins Enterprise, which we call CloudBees CI. I'll go over the slides and I'll take some minutes at the end just to show you how it looks like. You will see it looks like Jenkins, it feels like Jenkins, but it's better than Jenkins open source today. So first, remember, we have two patterns, Islands of Jenkins and Jenkinstein. So we take the good pattern from Jenkinstein, which is one instance. The management perspective is nice. We put that and we call that the operation center. So what is the operation center? It's the new instance, a new controller. We liked to call that the master of masters. So with the master of masters, you have one central instance which gives you the opportunity to create as many instances as you want, as many controllers, as many masters, Jenkins masters as you want. So in your cluster, you can have one operation center managing, controlling hundreds of Jenkins masters. That's a rare case to have hundreds of masters controllers, but it can be 10, 20, 50, and we have customers with 800 controllers running. The aim of this operation center is to have a central point where you can log in. You put that connected to your SSO. You could connect that to your Active Directory, your LDAP. All the central management for the users and for the cluster goes through the operation center. Once you have that management, you can create as many controllers as you want. And from the operation center, you have visibility over your cluster. You can see all the versions of the controllers that are deployed in all the teams. So we take the good from the pattern we've seen before, the Islands of Jenkins, which is each team having its own controller. It's nice, we like that, and we want to keep that way. And then this controller is connected to the operation center, and we can manage the version, we can manage the list of plugins that are deployed there, we can manage the configuration of all those controllers centrally. Whatever you do in Jenkins today, in the open source version of Jenkins, you can do with CloudBees CI. Remember, we work with Jenkins. All the versions of CloudBees CI we release every month rely on the LTS version of Jenkins. So if today you're working with dedicated agents connected to your controllers, to your masters, let's say, it will be the same with CloudBees CI. You can do the same if you want. Still, if you have many agents, and these agents all do the same work, and they are used for the same builds, the same jobs, the same tests, you don't need to have many masters that are dedicated to your controllers. You can put them in a pool that we call shared agents. The shared agents are pool of agents connected to the operation center. And whenever a controller, in the example here, controller number 2, whenever a controller needs an agent and there's no agent connected to it, the operation center will lease, so give the agent for just the build time to the controller, which means the controller does the job, the build, the test, the deployment is done in the agent that is leased to the controller. Once the job is finished, the agent is given back to the operation center, ready to be given to another controller. And you can have as many as you want this way and remove all the dedicated agents that you have running 24/7 and not using some of the time. So some of the figures that we have, some of the items that we provide from the operation center, for example, is this new item, which is called the cluster operation. Cluster operations is a new item from the operation center. As I said, from the operation center, you manage your cluster. You manage your entire ecosystem of Jenkins. So you can create as many masters as you want. You can create as many controllers as you want. And once you create them, you can manage them from the cluster operations. So upgrade them, restart them, install a plugin, uninstall a plugin, run a script on them directly from the operation center. So the operation center is not meant to build stuff, it's meant to manage the cluster. Based on JCask, which is available in open source today, so JCask allows you to do the configuration as code of your controller today in the open source community. We extended that at a cluster perspective. As we can create as many controllers as we want, it's nice to have a kind of a recipe which relies on the configuration as code. And in this configuration as code bundle, we put the main configuration of the controller, but also the list of plugins, the versions of the plugins, the items that people can create, the role-based access control, which is centrally managed from the operation center, can be defined in all the controllers. So based on the bundle, you create the controller you want. You can create a bundle of controllers with, let's say, Gradle and Nexus plugins and some configuration, and create as many controllers as you want based on that bundle. It's nice always to have a small set of plugins on your controllers. As we said, you have 1,800 plugins available today in the ecosystem. You don't need to install all of them. The less you install, the more stable your instance will be. So let's talk about plugins. It was a nice transition because plugins is very important subject for us. The plugin management in CloudBees CI is very important because today, whenever you use the open source version of Jenkins, you use open source stuff, which is great. Still, if at any point of time you have a security issue in your plugin, if you have a bug in your plugin, you rely on the community. You always need to go to the Google groups or ask the Jira on the Jira instance of Jenkins, okay, I have a problem. How can I fix that? Plugin management is very important because the entire life of CloudBees CI works with plugins. So within CloudBees CI, we introduced a new item, which is called Beekeeper. Beekeeper is here to make sure always that at any point of time, your ecosystem is safe. Safe from bugs and safe from security issues. Very important. So every time we release a new version of CloudBees CI, as I said, like every month, based on LTS version of Jenkins, we release a new version of CloudBees CI with a set of plugins and versions of these plugins. Very important because all these versions are tested by our teams, validated by our teams. So you can see on the table on the bottom right of the screen, the tiers that are tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. All the tier 1 plugins are the plugins that we write as CloudBees employees, and all the plugins that are part of the community, open source system, and that we check, we test, we verify, and we deliver. Meaning that all the plugins that are in tier 1, there are hundreds of plugins in tier 1, they are tested. So whenever we deliver a new version of CloudBees CI, we deliver a set of plugins that are tested, validated, and if you have any problem with those plugins, you call our support and we will fix the problem for you. Whenever we find a security breach or a bug, we deliver a new version of the plugin. The tier 2 that are the compatible plugins, more or less kind of the same. They are not constantly tested and verified, but if you have any problem with these plugins, we support them. And the tier 3 plugins are what we call the community plugins. So in this whole set, as I said, in 1,800 plugins, we don't go over all of them. There are many that are more or less useless. We can say there are plugins to tell you that to grab a beer. There are plugins to display a Chuck Norris face on your instance. More or less, we don't care about those plugins. They remain in the community. Also, there are plugins that are supported by other people, like the Nexus platform plugin is supported by Sonatype. The Jira or the Bitbucket plugins are mostly supported by Atlassian. The Artifactory plugin is supported by JFrog. So these plugins, we don't support them because a vendor already supports them. Still, they remain in the tier 3, the community version of the plugin. So now that you have this ecosystem of plugins in mind, Beekeeper is like the guardian of your instances. Beekeeper is constantly checking which versions of the plugins you have, which configuration you have. Are these plugins in what we call the CloudBees assurance program? If you install a plugin that is not validated by Beekeeper, if you install a plugin which the version is not validated by Beekeeper, you will have an alert saying you're putting your instance at risk. You're putting your cluster at risk. There's a bug in that plugin, or there's a security issue in that plugin. Beekeeper will always make sure that your environment is safe. Still, Beekeeper can be flexible, and you can tell him, I'm okay, I'm good, I take responsibility of installing this plugin or this version of this plugin. We are open to everything. Very important for us, this Beekeeper subject. I will show you at the end how it looks like. So what you've seen is more on the management perspective of the cluster. Now we will go through some of the features that are more development related, let's say. So the first one is the pipeline as code. Pipeline as code, I will show you at the end also how it looks like. Pipeline as code is very important for us because we have many customers who were complaining they're writing Jenkins files again and again and again. Whenever you create a new application, you write a Jenkins file, you have your pipeline. It's fine. But at some point, when you step back a bit and you look at your ecosystem, you see that most of the Jenkins files are always the same. If you have an application using same Java version, same using Maven to build, and using SonarQube to do the analysis, and Nexus to push your artifact, more or less you have the same pipeline. Why do you need as many Jenkins files as you have repositories in your Git account? So pipeline template catalogs are here for that. You just use one Jenkins file as a template, and it can be used by as many applications as you want. And this Jenkins file becomes a new item in your controller. So with this new item, you don't need to write a new Jenkins file. You don't need to put a Jenkins file every time in your repository. You just use your template, you click, and you have your new item and your new pipeline running in a second. Next part is the reporting. Kind of a reporting of the checks of the stages in a pull request, for example. So this feature, the SCM reporting, we delivered that in late 2020. It's available for GitHub and Bitbucket. And with that, whenever you create a pull request in your Git repository, you have a new pipeline running. This new pipeline is reflected directly in your pull request. So if you go in your pull request and you go into the checks tab, you have your pipeline with all the stages. If for any reason one of the stage fails, you just rerun it from your pull request directly from your repository. You don't need to go into your your Jenkins controller, checking where your pipeline is running and go into the logs and rerun the stage. You do that directly from your Git repository. And you have all the logs and the results and checks directly in your pull request. Another interesting feature that we delivered last year is the Crossteam Collaboration. So the Crossteam Collaboration allows you to run pipelines without knowing where they are. As you can have as many controllers as you want, if you want to run a build, you need always to go into the controller, go into the build, make sure your pipeline is running, for example, on a commit, on a webhook, or on a trigger, any kind of trigger. With the Crossteam Collaboration, you can trigger a pipeline in your cluster without knowing where it's running. So we use the Operation Center, as you've seen at the beginning, as a router, as a message bus. So you can send events to that Operation Center that will be sent to all the controllers, and all the pipelines that are listening to the event will be triggered, which means from a webhook, from a Git commit, from a click, you can trigger as many pipelines as you want. Very interesting for the people that are like deploying a new library, working on a new library, and this library will be used by many applications, and all the applications need to know that there's a new version of this library. In this case, just send an event saying, okay, new version ready, and all the pipelines are automatically triggered. We don't care where they are. You can have 20 controllers with pipelines everywhere. They will all be triggered from this simple event. We extended the folder plugin. So by default, in the open source version of Jenkins today, you can create folders. You have the folder plugin. With CloudBees CI, you have what we call the folder plus plugin, which allows you to create folders and have an extended management of what you put in that folder. You can restrict the kind of items you create in the folder. You can put a controller in the folder. You can move a controller from a folder to another folder. You can copy or move items from a controller to another controller. You can duplicate jobs into different controllers. All the environment variables that you create can be used by all the children of your folder. So whatever you create at folder level, you can propagate into all the children of your hierarchy. About the hibernation, this is something that was introduced last year and is widely used by our customers using Kubernetes today. We will go into the next slides, into the architecture. But first, you can relate as whenever you have a Jenkins master, so a Jenkins controller running, usually it's running 24/7, but it's not working 24/7. Most of the times, you need a controller only to run some builds once a day or at every commit during the day, but not during the night, not during the weekend. Which means if you're using a cloud provider, you're paying for resources. You're paying for CPU, for RAM, for storage. Even if you're not using your instance, it's up and running. So since last year, within CloudBees CI, we introduced the Controller Hibernation. With the hibernation, you just set an idle time to your controller. It can be different from a controller to the other. And if during this idle period, nothing happens, no build, nobody connected, nobody browsed the instance shuts down. Technically, it's just the pod is destroyed. You're not using CPU anymore. You're not using RAM anymore. The only thing that remains is the PVC connected to that. So you're just using the small amount of storage your instance uses, but you're not using CPU and RAM anymore. So you're not paying for infrastructure that you're not using anymore. And the figure you can see on the bottom right is the real figure of our demo system that you will see right after. Our demo system before and after adding the hibernation last year. So just a demo system with one operation center and 5 controllers running on Google Cloud. And thanks to the hibernation, we reduced the cost of our infrastructure. So imagine that with dozens of controllers. Quickly about the architecture, we have 2 models. The first model that we have is what we call the traditional one. So the CloudBees CI on traditional platform. CloudBees CI on traditional platform is CloudBees CI running on VMs, bare metal, whatever you want. So you can have a VM for the operation center, a VM for each and every controller that you have in your ecosystem. It looks like this. So the operation center can be connected to the update center of CloudBees, to your SSO, you can put the shared agents to the operation center, and you have all your controllers running in your cluster. More and more people are using Kubernetes, which is fine because we have what we call the CloudBees CI on modern platforms more than traditional, so the Kubernetes version of CloudBees CI. So CloudBees CI on Kubernetes looks like this. You can have a cluster directly in Kubernetes, and each and every item here will be a pod running. So you have a pod with the operation center, a pod for your team 1, which will be a controller, team 2, which will be another controller, and so on. And you can have as many controllers as you want in your Kubernetes cluster. More than that, we work multi-cloud, which means you can have masters, controllers running in a Kubernetes cluster, for example, in Google Cloud, and masters, controllers running on AWS, for example, or on Azure, on OpenShift, or directly on your on-prem cloud, for example. You can have operation center running in Kubernetes and a controller running on a VM. So we work with hybrid also. So the overall architecture is super flexible. I will not spend time on this slide. You will have the slides afterwards, but in the Kubernetes world, it looks like this. You can have as many nodes as you want, putting the nodes wherever you want. And based on that, all the pods are running in your cluster. The agents, same way. All the agents can be shared agents, dedicated agents, or pods running on your infrastructure. Quick example for the technical guys of you to show how to install CloudBees CI. You see, it's very simple. We create just a YAML file. So we provide the Helm chart. We provide the YAML file that you fill. You put all the data you want for if you want to use our Ingress controller, if you want to use Hibernation, and then you put just your domain name and the values for your Ingress, the TLS part. You just create your namespace, you add our repository, you run the install, and in a minute or so, you're up and running with CloudBees CI. So it's very simple and still very powerful for your company. Again, I believe you will have all the documentation and you will have the slides. So we have a YouTube channel if you want to see some of the demos or some of the discussions around CloudBees CI, but not only, also on CloudBees CD and on CloudBees Feature Management. We have CloudBees University for trainings, for certifications, if you want certifications around Jenkins, and a lot of documentation. So all our documentation is public. Don't hesitate to go there and get some information. We have very nice blog posts. So now I will go over a demo part. Okay. So it looks like this. I am in the operation center. Just to remember, it looks like this. I'm in the purple box right here in the operation center. But as I said, it looks like Jenkins. It feels like Jenkins. It is Jenkins, but it's an extended version of Jenkins. You can see on the top here, it says Cloud Operation Center. So I am in the operation center. All the items you see here are controllers. Masters for the people who are still using the word master. These are Jenkins masters. And you can see on the left here, some of them are hibernated. So for those ones, they are sleeping, hibernating. I'm not using CPU, I'm not using RAM. They are free on the infrastructure part. So first, if I want to create a new controller, it's really simple. I go up there, I say I will create a SysOps controller. I click on Go. I can fill some of the information if I want. So just for information, I'm using Kubernetes on Google Cloud right now. So I have a GKE cluster. I can say, okay, I will use 50 gigs of RAM, of storage. I will use this amount of RAM. I can change whatever I want. For the demo, I just click on save. And then it will start a new pod and start the new instance inside. So if I go back to my dashboard, I can see that the DevOps controller is offline right now. You can see offline. It's starting. So I have a new controller. I'm almost ready to work on this controller. While it's starting, you can see on the top here, I have some alerts. Because I'm using an old version of CloudBees CI, old meaning it's a few weeks old, there's a new version of CloudBees CI ready. And in this version, we detected some issues. So I have an alert here. I click on more info, and I have my security warnings here. I see, okay, there's a new version of CloudBees CI Operation Center, and in this version, we fix all these security issues, and we fix these vulnerabilities in the plugins. So if I want to upgrade my version, I want to see what's going on. As you can see on the left, all these icons, this is Beekeeper, the one we talked about. So I go into the upgrades, and I see from the upgrades, all this will be upgraded. So if I go into the upgrade and I go into the latest version of CloudBees CI, I will have all these plugins upgraded from this version to this version. I will have new plugins installed, and my instance will be up and running. So as I said before, whenever we release a new version of CloudBees CI, we release a set of plugins with CloudBees CI. All these plugins are upgraded because the new versions are validated by our teams to be compatible, verified, safe for your environment. Very important. The power of Beekeeper, if I go into the CAP configuration, so CAP is the CloudBees Assurance Program here. Maybe I need to zoom in a bit. So Beekeeper can have two powers. As I said, whenever you want to upgrade your instance, or for example, if someone installs a plugin and the plugin is not compatible or not the good version, I can tell Beekeeper to automatically upgrade or downgrade the plugin version on each restart of the instance. So it's very important for us because if someone's installed a plugin and the plugin is not compatible with my version, I'm putting my instance at risk. So Beekeeper can automatically take care of that. In the same time, you will have an alert on top. Back to my dashboard. I will unzoom a bit. So you see my controller for SysOps that I created is up and running already. It's fine. I have a new controller. I can play with it. It's a fresh controller. But still for the demo, I will use the shared demo one. So I have a controller here. So another controller, another instance, another Jenkins master, let's say. In this Jenkins master, we will go over just to show you the hibernation. If I go into Manage Jenkins, Configure System here, and if I scroll down, I have somewhere here the automatic hibernation. Here it's set to 2 hours because I wouldn't want it to sleep before the demo today, but I can say, okay, after 30 minutes, my controller will be put to sleep. And if any build is running, if anybody is browsing, it will stay awake. I can put the number I want. It's all in seconds, but it means after 30 minutes, if nothing happens on my controller, it's shut down, and I'm not paying my cloud provider for it. So big economy. Up, back here. Remember in the presentation, we talked about the pipeline templates. I'll go over the last few minutes over the pipeline template catalogs to show you how it works. So for example, I take the usual application that we use for demos. It's Pet Clinic. So Pet Clinic is a simple application. You can see in my GitHub account here, I have a Pet Clinic repository in GitHub. In this Pet Clinic, I have a Jenkins file. Obviously, it's a Jenkins file that shows how my application is built. So I see that I'm running a Maven command, and then I'm doing a SonarQube analysis, then I'm publishing my artifact to Nexus, and I'm checking my feature flag. It's using CloudBees feature management section. So what it looks like in my controller, I have this one, the Spring Pet Clinic multi-branch, which is just a normal multi-branch pipeline connected to my Pet Clinic Git repository. And based on that, it scans the branches and run my Jenkins file inside. Super simple, very well known, it works. Remember, if you have many applications using the same way of working, you don't need to create as many Jenkins files as you have application. By default, yes, but using the pipeline templates, you don't need to spend time doing that anymore. So how it works. I go back in my repository. I have a repository which is called here, pipeline template catalog. Pipeline template catalog is my Jenkins file that I created for Pet Clinic. I remove it from my repository and I put it in a templates folder. So I have my Jenkins file here, which is my Jenkins file. I removed some parts that became parameters. For example, I go into the YAML file, which works with my Jenkins file. In this template YAML file, I have some parameters, which is the GitHub repo owner, for example, the repo name, the credentials I'll be using to connect, and an email if something fails. I can put all the parameters I want into this YAML file. So for this demo, I put these 4 parameters. I can put more, less. It's up to you. Based on that, I go back here. On my controller on the left side here, you can see pipeline template catalogs. I go here and I see I created, it's connected to my GitHub account. So from this GitHub account, I see I have a multi-branch pipeline here. Multi-branch pipeline for Spring applications from GitHub. Yes, it's this one. I created that from my GitHub repository, which means based on that, I can create as many jobs as I want using one single Jenkins file. Remember also the folder section. So in my folder here, I restrict the kind of jobs I put inside. So for this demo here, I restricted, and I restricted also for this new item. So I have a new item for my folder. I will go inside, and if I click on new item, I have a very small section, and I will be using this one. It will be the SysOps pipeline, for example. I'm using this one, which means I'll be using the Jenkins file from my template. And I have my parameters. I don't configure anything more than this. So for my example, I would be using CloudBees root. The repository name is Pet Clinic. I'm using this credential, and if anything goes wrong, I will mail myself. I save, and I'm up and running, which means if I go in the repository log, it found all the branches, and in my SysOps pipeline, my pipelines are already running. So from one Jenkins file, if I want, I created this one, which is the one we have, but I can create a new item if I want using the real Spring Pet Clinic. 2 minutes more? Yeah?
I have a question. Could you please enlarge your font?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Sorry. Okay. I create a new job, which will be this one, and I will be using, for example, the real Pet Clinic, which is on Spring projects, for example. I believe it's called Spring Pet Clinic. And again, if it doesn't go right, I will mail myself. And if I go there, I can see some up. My new branches are here. So in my pipeline, by default, I have my pipeline running right now. As you can see, if I go there, all my pipeline is running in pods everywhere. I have agents that started directly from my pipeline that I didn't have before. They are started just for this pipeline, and they will be destroyed right after. And my pipeline is running. Same as my multi-branch pipeline by default. So I'm using the same way of working. I'm using the same Jenkins file, but for as many jobs as I want, just using one Jenkins file as a template. So as it's a catalog, I can have as many templates as I want. But in my case, I just want my jobs to be running Maven, SonarQube, Nexus, and I'm done. And I believe that's it. I guess I'm done. If there is any question more, anything that was not clear, don't hesitate to post that. And I'm good. Any questions? Anything in the chat? I don't read the chat. I don't know.
Not yet. I think it's no question.
Okay. How many times do I mean, how long do I have more if I want to take more time?
I think 10 minutes, 15. It's okay.
Okay. I'll go quickly over one or two more things. So back to my pipeline. Not this one, this one. Okay, my pipeline has run, which means if I go into my default pipeline I created before with my Jenkins file directly in the repository, I had this, which is fine. And now in my new pipeline, I have exactly the same pipeline. Still, if I go back to the configure section, I'm just using parameters. Remember that. We can combine that with shared libraries, obviously, of course, very important. And more than that, we added policies for pipelines. Policies are a set of best practices that you need to have in your pipeline. So in the set of policies, we have the agent timeout, post-action timeout, post-action in agent, and the pipeline timeout. What does it mean? It means whenever you write a pipeline, you should never block an agent. If an agent is blocked for too long doing nothing, you have to have a timeout. The pipeline policy is here for that, making sure that you have written your timeout in your pipeline. Post-action timeout is the same. You have to have a timeout on a post-action, on a manual input command directly in your pipeline. The post-action in agent, you should never have a pause in an agent. You should never have manual input in an agent. It should always be outside the agent. Otherwise, you're blocking an agent waiting for nothing. And then adding a timeout to your pipeline. We have many customers that are not applying policies and having pipelines running and running and running and all together, and then they are blocked somewhere and they are still running. You have to add a timeout to your pipeline and know why it's blocking somewhere. And the policies are here for that. If one of the policies is not met at the beginning of the pipeline run, the pipeline will be blocked at the very beginning, saying you have a problem, you need to add a timeout or remove your pause action or free your agent. Up. What else do we have? The configuration as code. It will be the last part. Promise, I will not bother with more tech stuff after that. So the configuration as code that we have seen in the presentation is an extended version of JCask. So for example, in my controller here, you see I have the CloudBees configuration as code bundle button here. If I click on it, I can see all the files that define my instance. For example, the first one, so the Jenkins.yaml file is the one that is available in JCask already today. To that, we added the bundle.yaml file, which defines all of these files, the plugins YAML file, the plugin catalog file, for example. So the plugins.yaml file, if I go into it, I see all the plugins that define my instance today. If I create a new controller with this bundle, it will have this set of plugins. I have my plugin catalog file. Plugin catalog are specific plugins I added with a specific version. And all these plugins are here in these versions, which means if I create, again, a new controller based on this recipe, based on this bundle, I will have the list of plugins that you've seen before with the most compatible version of your bundle, and this list of plugins with these specific versions. Then the role-based access control. As I said before, you define your role-based access control from the operation center to your entire cluster, and then you can adapt and put some specific roles and specific permissions into your controller. And then the list of items that can be created directly when you create your controller based on this configuration bundle. All this configuration bundle end up in a Git repository, which means if I go here and I go somewhere, I should have a cask. Here, not a Cascade demo. Is it this one? No, it's not this one. That's feature management. Bed cleaning cask, feature management. I will know. It will be on my GitHub account. Somewhere I have this. So I have my controller with some of the files I want to have. The others I don't want. I didn't want to keep the items. I didn't want to keep the role-based access control. I want the basic things, which are these files. Whenever I update one of these files, I will have an update here in the bundle update section. So I will have an alert in the bell on top here, and I will have an update here. So whenever I'm pushing a new version of my configuration bundle into Git, my Git repository, can be GitHub, can be any SCM that you're using. Whenever I push an update into my Git repository, I can update all my controllers, which means I'm not only creating a new controller based on the configuration bundle, but I'm also managing my ecosystem based on my Git repository. Whenever I change a configuration, I change a version of a configuration or a plugin inside my bundle in my Git repository, it will be pushed to all the controllers in my ecosystem. So configuration as code is a very powerful tool to manage the configuration of all your controllers at once. And quickly, you see no difference in the usage, and we don't want to change the behavior. I'm in the operation center right now. I'm in a controller right now, so a master, you can see on top, managed master. It's the same UI, it's the same feeling, it's the same use, but in the end, it's not the same job. So I can see all my controllers here from my operation center. I can see the versions I'm using on each and every controller. If I want to change the version of my controller, I just go into the configure section and I change the value here. You don't see the drop-down list, but I have a drop-down list. Here, for example, I'm changing the values here. Up. And I will stop, for example, the controller here that I created before. And this way I can stop it, remove it, restart it, recreate it from a user's perspective. It's really easy.